All right, I am on the road again, and I'm just going to give you another discussion of what's happening with regards to the Biden presidency, also in the wake of what happened in Kenosha and in Waukesha and his struggles on the economic front. First of all, though, I am recording this on Podbean. If you want more links to the writing and video pages and also social media that I use, go to my BitChute account. So it's bitchute.com, and then find Chef Leopard, or you can also find Bold Like a Leopard on Odyssey or on YouTube and a number of other places. Also Chef Leopard on Rumble. Anyway, so to get us started, the Biden administration has had to clarify, or the White House spokesperson has had to clarify, that the president is still hoping to seek re-election in 2024. And one of the reasons that they have to say that is because Biden is 79. He's the oldest person ever to run for or hold the position of President of the United States. And many people have looked at him as more of a caretaker who will pass the torch to someone else. The person, of course, intended to be the successor has been Kamala Harris, but I wouldn't be surprised if most Democrats now are saying, well, do we really want this person to be the chief executive after Biden leaves? And the reasons for this are many. Kamala Harris has basically been a net liability for the Biden administration. And that's because her personality is much more fake than even Biden. She's much less ambitious in terms of actually trying to get into the job that she's supposed to do. This is with regards to the border. This is with regards to meetings with foreign leaders. She regularly makes embarrassing public appearances, such as the one where she tried to do like a very strange affectation of a French speech cadence while visiting a laboratory in France. So these are things, maybe they're trivial. Maybe we don't really have the best way to judge her yet, but there's a reason many people would not like Kamala Harris to succeed Joe Biden. So he has to come out and say, yeah, I plan to run in 2024. And this is something that we know from recent memory happened in Germany. Germany had a chancellor, Angela Merkel, who was in office for a very long time, and they appointed a successor, Anna Kramp-Karrenbauer, I think her name was, or Annegret, whatever. Her first name was Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. So this was a woman who was supposed to be the heir apparent to to the leader, to Angela Merkel, and she flopped, and nobody really had any confidence in her, and they sacked her. In the end, Merkel had to step aside much later. Anyway, so the reason that I'm bringing this up is I would say that Biden at this point, we've talked about presidents who have had bad terms in office. For example, Barack Obama did not have a great second term. It was basically him fighting the Republicans the entire time. It was they were talking about obstruction. The rise of ISIS was much more of an issue under Obama. You have to remember that Obama, when he took office, was he was inheriting an economic depression, but essentially by becoming this president who failed to unite the country behind him, and instead he basically had, he was a lame duck president for the last 6 years of his time in office, except, of course, he was able to appoint some people because they had the Senate for 4 years, actually, I think it was 6 years. But Obama he's still considered a success. You have Bill Clinton considered a success despite the fact that he lost both chambers of Congress after only 2 years, never got them back. Bill Clinton is considered a success because he was able to get reelected by a wide margin, and also because he was able to reach across the aisle and get a lot of very interesting points of cooperation with the Republicans by becoming the emblem of the third way Democrat. So while in his ideas, while in his beliefs and his postures, Bill Clinton has always been on the left, and he's always believed in things like emancipation for the gay community and abortion, and he's always believed in high taxation and everything. So his presidency was actually a contradiction of some of those values, because you do know, of course, that under Clinton they passed the Clinton crime bill. They passed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It wasn't really passed. It was more of like an official policy. Bill Clinton did things like create means testing for welfare recipients, something that the Republicans had never even dreamed of. They'd never even dreamed of being able to do it under all the presidents that they had in office, and suddenly they had Congress and they were able to force Clinton to do it. So, and then there's the Telecom Act, which I think, whether you're a conservative or a liberal, you might say was a bad idea at this point. Telecom Act of 1996, look it up. It's one of the reasons we have such a corrupt, corporatized media here in the 21st century. So, to rehash, those are presidents that were considered successful, even though they had very problematic terms where they went through a lot of very difficult situations. The president who's considered largely to be the failure before Biden and there's people who will call Trump a failure. I would say that it's still the jury's out on that. But the president that was considered a failure before all of them would be Jimmy Carter. And people talk about the malaise speech. I would say that Joe Biden is now the vacuum president. He's created a vacuum, a leadership vacuum. Nobody knows really who's in charge. Some people say that it's Chief of Staff Ron Klain. Other people say it's Barack Obama. Some people say it's his wife, Jill Biden. Nobody really knows. I'm sure there are people who know better than we do, but the people who don't have inside knowledge don't necessarily know. And we're talking about a real problematic situation, and that's why, if you're looking at Biden's poll approval ratings, they're simply sinking, and it's for a combination of factors. The Biden presidency came about, whether you believe in the election results or not. The Biden voter, the Biden movement, if any such movement exists, which is dubious, but let's say for argument's sake that there is one, in this idea that Donald Trump was too polarizing of a figure. He'd endangered the country during COVID, and he'd also been a serial liar, and you couldn't trust the thing he said. He was corrupt. All the different things they said about his sexual escapades are true. That's the way a lot of these people will think. And for the United States to move ahead and get out of the COVID crisis and get out of all of the division and controversy, they needed somebody who would be a unifier and who would be more of this elder statesman, somebody who would listen to the experts and do what they say and not shoot from his hip. And that was their big criticism of Donald Trump, that he was so impulsive and so self-absorbed and egotistical that he couldn't take real practical advice from anyone. And a lot of these people, of course, they're believers in Anthony Fauci and in the coronatarianism and in the public health mandates and all those things. And they were believers in that type of thing before they knew. Because if you were to ask them in 2020 whether they would support vaccine mandates, whether they would support even in some cases mask mandates and lockdowns, I'm sure some of them would have said at the time, no, that's not really something that I would support. We can defeat the virus without doing those things. And now the people who have remained resolute and support Biden remain very much in favor of those things, even though none of those have proven to be true. We see that his promise, Biden's promise to defeat the virus or shut down the virus were the words. He was going to shut down the virus, not shut down the economy. Those words were empty rhetoric because, of course, the virus has not been shut down. The virus you can't shut down a virus. It's not something that man can exactly eliminate, right? And instead, the economy is a shambles. And even today, this is actually the second time I'm recording this edition, because the first time it wasn't as organized as I wanted. But today, Biden actually had to tap 50 million barrels out of the strategic reserve, I think it's called, of petroleum. So here, in the midst of this crisis of the economy, of energy, of COVID, public health, the defense crisis with China increasingly showing that it probably could be a winner in a war against the United States. You even have the retreat from Afghanistan, which was a disaster. It still has some repercussions in the news, and even news that is troubling the liberals with regards to the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, and now the Waukesha attack, which I'm sure does not make them happy either. Now they're going to have a different stance than a conservative would have, but they're not going to be happy about it. So all of the unity, all of the good feeling that Biden's election was supposed to engender never really happened. And it didn't happen because there was no real substance behind it. The Biden presidency always has been and always will be about corporate and state control over the lives and beliefs of the citizens of the United States and beyond, right? So that's why it's been largely a failure up to this point, and that's why you're seeing the polls sag. As of the last time I checked, it was at 41.3% in the Real Clear Politics aggregate, and we're going to see it sluggishly decline a little bit more, at least for the time being, because there's no real sign that there's anything that the Democrats can pass that will actually help them get over the hump here. So, and in the midst of this, we have people who are publishing articles, and these aren't conservatives. These are A.B. Stoddard of Real Clear Politics, who is the site's more liberal analyst. I think it's a woman. So she's put forward the prospect that Biden's candidacy is basically shot. He's basically a lame duck president, if I remember correctly, and that people are behaving as if he's already a lame duck president, and that he's not going to run for president again. This was before, of course, he had, or the White House had, a statement issued that he would run for president again. And then today, Jonathan Chait, who is one of the more, like, I think Jimmy Dore would probably call him a shit lib, like a person who has very, like, pronounced leftist views, is a big virtue signaler, but in the end is also a tremendous liar. So Jonathan Chait, who was always a person who, I think he would be characterized as kind of an Elizabeth Warren type liberal. So he's also published the piece where he says, well, Biden is at risk of becoming a failed president. So when you have people who are liberal commentators who have every reason to, basically hope for Biden to succeed if they want to have America look the way they want it, and they're saying that Biden is a failed president, then, or is becoming a failed president, then we have plenty of evidence here that he doesn't have much of where to go, and beyond just the press expressing its concerns about Biden. And I think it is concern because many of these people, they wanted Biden to come to be president because they felt that his presidency would save the way of life that they imagined for themselves. Now, the reason that's not the only thing that's concerning for him is that there are people, I believe the communications director for Kamala Harris is leaving the White House, and there are other people within the administration that are leaving the White House. Now, the press, I think, is the main group that they're sounding the alarm because they know that they have a lot to lose if the Biden presidency becomes a lame duck. And why is that? The reason for this is because Biden was supposed to restore the normalcy on which they felt they could actually get back to the America where they were trusted. And you have to think about it as the press in America is not used to being basically ignored and treated as if it is only, some mediocrity that doesn't really deserve people's respect. The respect for journalism in the past decade has dropped a lot because of, and it's only gotten worse because they just don't seem to learn that you cannot cut corners when it comes to factual standards for stories, and you cannot just call for censorship and have no regard for the First Amendment of other people, only for yourself. That's basically the way the press has behaved over the past several years. You can see it in several sagas, such as the one, for example, the one that I always point to. I know some people might be getting tired of it. The Rolling Stone rape on campus story, which was before Donald Trump became president, I think was a turning point that got me interested in how media is manipulating the masses in order to get them angry and agitated. And at that time, you didn't really need to look at it as a political story because it was more of a society story. It was about people who were frat boys who were being defamed as rapists by a journalist who had no regard for actually pursuing the truth. And when that story turned out to be a falsehood, the people who put it forward had no remorse, and they had no regard for the harm that they did in terms of trust in the media and in the press. And what I had hoped would happen afterward, which obviously was the opposite happened, was that the press would decide, look, we have a lot of power here, and we can create movements, we can change minds, and on the other hand, we can also create a lot of pain and lead people down a path of anger and even life-ruining, harassment and things like that, which is basically what happened in Virginia in that story. And the media did the exact opposite. They basically, you had standards just getting worse and worse. You come to a point where it's now 7 years later, 7 years after that story was published in Rolling Stone, and trust in media has eroded more. You've had hoaxes that are much more large in scope and damage than the Rolling Stone piece, such as the Russian collusion hoax. You have the gas attack in Syria issue, which is still ongoing, which I guess you could say that there are multiple interpretations of it at this point. And you have a lot of fake journalism concerning the coronavirus pandemic, which you do see that there are mainstream organizations that are policing and now using fact checkers in order to prevent what they call disinformation from coming out. And then it turns out that the disinformation turned out to be true, and their information turned out to be false, such as the Lancet article from, I think it was in 2020, that was alleging that masks were not, I don't remember. There was some story in the Lancet where they used a very incomplete data set. Oh yes, it was to disqualify the use of hydroxychloroquine and zinc. So there are many, many stories that are coming out that are showing that the media is not somebody to be trusted, and therefore the person who is the darling of the media, the person that the media put forward as the one who would heal America, who would restore the trust and restore the confidence in America, he is also dragging them down with him. And they know that they can no longer hide behind Joe Biden, because if people, they're living their daily lives, they know that gasoline is getting more expensive. They know their groceries are getting more expensive. They know their heating bill is getting more expensive. They know their schools are not getting better in terms of their standards. And they know their kids are not happy with the type of education that they're getting. And yet the media tells them to be happy, or they tell them, oh, do better with less. Make do with less. Be a better person. Don't be so selfish. You need to learn how to sacrifice more for the common good and everything. And a lot of the people who they signed on to this Biden campaign because they hoped normalcy would be restored, they are now seeing that, no, the real goal the real goal of the people behind Biden had nothing to do with restoring normalcy. The real goal was always absolute power and the lack of accountability. So they're getting angry and disillusioned with him, and that's why, at least to some degree, his polls are declining. And let me be clear, I think that there will always be a core group of people that will implicitly trust the Democratic Party and the people in power and the Biden administration, and his polls are going to have a floor. I don't think that, for example, he's going to get less than 35% in the polls in the near future, but you don't know what's going to happen if there's another crisis at home, or if there's some sort of environmental disaster, or whatever the case is, and Biden has to deal with it and he comes up short. I think that we can see that there were several examples of events where Biden attempted to basically be, have like a very signature moment. The issues, for example, of Afghanistan, where he hoped to be the person who would get credit for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And now they won't even say the word Afghanistan because the withdrawal was so disastrous. You have the example of the inflation crisis, where he is basically trying to say, well, there's all these other reasons why there's inflation. None of them have to do with me. Those are things that he can't run away from. And those are crises that are good examples, A, with the Afghanistan crisis of a catastrophic incident that hurt his polling, and B, when you look at inflation, that's a chronic issue that's going to keep affecting him. It's not going to be just one sudden drop. It's going to be a long trend that he has to address in order for it to get corrected, and there's no sign that he's going to be able to correct this before the midterms. And if they lose in that midterm election and lose badly, yes, not only will Biden be a lame duck president, I don't think that he will be able to remain as president, period. I think that he'll have a very tough reckoning finding out that, now I have to deal with Congress doesn't have to do anything that I say. They don't care what I say. They're basically, fighting to do the opposite of what I say. I think that it could end up being that he will resign and bow out at that point, because he's not going to see it as being worthwhile to just sit in the White House and take pictures and wait to be impeached. So that's about it for now. Please like, share, and subscribe. I urge you strongly to subscribe to me somewhere besides YouTube. So please find me on BitChute, on Odyssey. You have me on Rumble. You can find me on Subscribestar if you want to throw me some money. You can also find me on Minds.com and Gab if you want to chat or comment on some posts or send me some texts. And then you can find me on my newsletter, which is below, as well as my Telegram channel. And have a great night. Take it easy.